Part 1. Reasons not to get rich. Chapter 1. Pole positions. No task is a long one, but the task on which one dare not start. It becomes a nightmare. Charles Baudelaire. My heart laid bare. Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. For a great many people, getting started on the road to wealth is the most difficult part, or so they believe. The nuances of each individual case need not concern us, but the difficulties, as stated by virtually every wannabe I ever listened to on the subject, usually fall into one of three broad categories, often age-related. If young and relatively penniless, many will argue their lack of experience and capital, especially capital, dooms them to decades of wage slavery. If slightly better off and on the way up, with a halfway decent job and perhaps the probability of further advancement, the problem is often considered to be the loss of what they have already achieved, plus the lack of capital. By the time one is a senior manager or professional, probably with a decent house, a mortgage and children, it is the risk to the security and happiness of the latter, and maybe to a spouse, plus the usual lack of capital, which are most often cited as insuperable difficulties to taking the plunge. All such objections to becoming rich are spurious, no matter how sincerely held. But before dealing with each in turn, let me digress for a moment regarding upbringing, race, colour, educational qualifications, and gender. I'm doing so here because I do not wish to waste anybody's time. We will be touching on some of the circumstances described above shortly, but, in a nutshell, my experience has been that money is colour-blind, race-blind, sex-blind, degree-blind, and couldn't care less who brought you up or in what circumstances. Money is one of the most neutral substances on earth. Others may conspire against you obtaining it through bigotry or prejudice, but they can only succeed if you permit them to. The object of your goal, in and of itself, is non-sentient. If you truly believe that your race, sex, or upbringing can keep you from becoming rich, then you had best give up here. Either return this book to the shelf, or, if you've already bought it, return it to the bookstore for a refund, or give it to a friend. You may obtain the refund or please your friend, but you'll never get rich. Young, penniless, and inexperienced? It's the same the whole world over. It's the poor what gets the blame. It's the rich what gets the pleasure. Ain't it all a bleedin' shame? Variety Hall song from around 1915. Excellent! You stand by far the best chance of becoming as rich as you please. You have an advantage that neither education nor upbringing nor even money can buy. You have almost nothing. And therefore you have almost nothing to lose. Yes, I know you've heard it all before, but consider for a moment. Nearly all the great fortunes acquired by entrepreneurs arose because they had nothing to lose. Nobody had bothered to tell them that such and such a thing could not be done or would be likely to fail. Or if they had been told, then they weren't listening. They were too busy proving those around them wrong, without even meaning to. Not knowing that something cannot be done, you are likely to waltz into uncharted minefields where angels before you have feared to dance. Astonishingly, you may be fortunate enough to succeed to some degree or another. Conventional wisdom will then be revised by those around you, and the next generation will be taught that what you did can always or often be done, only to discover when they attempt it themselves that in reality you missed every landmine by pure dumb luck. Never trust the vast mountain of conventional wisdom. It contains great nuggets of wisdom, that is true, but they lie alongside rivers of fool's gold. Conventional wisdom daunts initiative and offers far too many convenient reasons for inaction, especially for those with a great deal to lose. Fortunately for you, you do not have anything to lose, and can afford to ignore the Jobsworths and Jeremiahs who have lived upon the mountain for so long that they have come to worship it. Nor is a propensity for risk-taking your only advantage. You have stamina far, far beyond those who are 20 or 30 years older. The stamina necessary for long, grinding hours of labour in the cause of getting rich. Stamina enough to party all night and go straight back to work for a 12 or 16-hour day. I remember such stamina fondly. You have no idea how much the stamina of the young is envied by the rest of us. Along with a degree of callousness and enviable powers of speedy recuperation from reverses, stamina is your secret weapon. Its attributes will see you through a raft of catastrophes that would virtually annihilate older men and women. In addition, your instinctive knowledge of modern technology gives you another edge. All those hours spent playing computer or video games might not have been such a waste after all. At least you know the difference between an iPod and a JPEG. And knowledge is power, at whatever age, whether earned by blood and tears or imbibed at a mother's breast. Treasure that instinctive knowledge. I still own half of the personal computing magazines in Britain: PC Pro, Computer Shopper, Computer Buyer, Mac User, Custom PC, in part because of an early addiction to pinball and electronic arcade games. While I knew nothing of computing, and still do not, the instincts honed by countless hours of shoving money into slots forewarned me of their potential. The first few £1,000,000 I ever trousered were a direct result of trusting instincts entirely at odds with conventional wisdom of any sort. Two immediate examples leap to mind. As we will see in more detail later, I published a series of 8-page, full-colour, folded posters, with headlines and articles printed on the back, and charged the same cover price as magazines with 10 times that number of pages. The result was dubbed a poster magazine, and sold millions of copies around the world. Nobody had told me it couldn't be done because nobody had done it before. Similarly, as previously noted, I launched half a dozen magazines about a new fad called personal computing back in the 1980s, even though British magazine retailers and wholesalers at the time were unanimous in their belief that nobody will ever buy them. Those magazines have earned me tens of millions of pounds in the last 25 years and are still earning me money today. Conventional wisdom is usually right, but when it's wrong, it can offer quite extraordinary opportunities for those too stubborn or inexperienced to pay attention to well-meaning naysayers. Perhaps most importantly of all, as a young and penniless and inexperienced person, you are not an expert. Thus you are more willing to learn than those in their 30s, 40s or 50s. You are not afraid of making mistakes, admitting them when you do, and getting right back on track. Speaking of tracks, you have no track record to defend either. Here is a pearl beyond price, and glory hallelujah, it costs you nothing to obtain. Anyone not busy learning is busy dying. For as long as you foster a willingness to learn, you will ward off sclerosis of the brain and hardening of the mental arteries. Curiosity has led many a man and women into the valley of serious wealth. Ambition, fearlessness, self-belief, stamina, a degree of callousness, a willingness to learn. These are your advantages over the middle-aged and the old. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Could you turn the clock back for me 40 years? I would willingly swap you every penny and every possession I own in return. And I would have the better of the bargain too. So what does the future hold for a young man or woman determined to become far wealthier than their parents? Here is how I see it. The way will most likely be hard, your failures many. It will be fun, and it will get a little hairy, even scary at times, but the earlier you start, and the more risks you're prepared to run, tempered by listening hard and choosing the right mountain, we'll come to that later, the more certain it is that, sooner or later, you will find yourself with a small success on your hands. And one success, with luck, will lead to another. If there is a single category of person for whom this book should prove the most useful, it is you, the young, penniless and inexperienced. I know, I've been there. And if I was lucky enough to find a way through, then so can you. Stick with me, young brother or sister. You are suffering from nothing more than excusable confusion and a lack of experience. Conditions that will pass with time, and whose passing can be expedited by fierce determination and application. Believe it or not, I envy each and every one of you. Slightly better off and on the way up? I have a bone to pick with fate. Come here and tell me, girlie, do you think my mind is maturing late, or simply rotted early? Ogden Nash, from Lines on Facing 40. This is the point at which many people vaguely wonder about starting their own business, either on their own or with a partner or two. They have enough experience to know how the companies they work for function, perhaps even how their industry functions, and they see a niche, as yet imperfectly filled. They have an idea. See Chapter 5, The Fallacy of the Great Idea. Yet they hesitate. They fear losing what they have already achieved more than they desire to enrich themselves. Personally, I am on more than familiar terms with this syndrome. I meet it every day because it affects, or afflicts, a great many of the fine men and women who run my own companies, perhaps even a majority of them. I employ a great many people smarter than I am. That's not false modesty, that's a stone-cold fact. The only two reasons such geniuses continue to work for me and put money into my pocket are that, on the positive side, they enjoy their work, and on the negative side, they fear losing what they've already gained: challenging work, congenial colleagues, a certain status, and the promise of promotion and pay rises. They know this as well as I do. They are far from fools, otherwise I would hardly employ them. But fear holds them back, with the exception of those rare individuals who are content with their lot. And what is fear? Fear is the little death, death by 1,000 cuts, goes the ancient Japanese saying. Nifty, but ultimately unhelpful, similar to Shakespeare's "Cowards die many time before their deaths, the valiant never taste of death but once." But is fear really the father of cowardice? Let's leave that to the philosophers. In business, in the accumulation of wealth, it is an impediment for sure, but then so is recklessness. No, I believe that it is the fear of failure which looms largest here. And fear of failure is definitely something that can be dealt with, and will be dealt with at length in this book. See Chapter 3, Harnessing the Fear of Failure. Outsiders are sometimes surprised at my reaction when people in this category, the slightly better off and on their way up, decide to leave one of my own companies and set up on their own. I always wish them well. Not only outwardly, but in my heart too. Often I throw a party for them, or write glowing testimonials. Once or twice I have even underwritten their office lease, or introduced them to a banker or a lawyer I trust. Why do I react that way? 3 reasons. Firstly, I'm proud of them. proud that those who work for me are brave enough, motivated enough, and trained sufficiently well to go for it on their own. Boldness attracts applause, as the writer and philosopher Goethe once remarked in a doggerel. Whatever you can do, or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Secondly, it's win-win. If they fail, they may well return to our company, especially if they remember that my senior colleagues and I sincerely wish them success in their new venture. Thus, if they fail, the company will be enhanced by their return, while if they should succeed, then we will be all the richer for having an old alumnus as a friendly rival in the industry, rather than having created an enemy who wishes us anything but well. Lastly, it's because I fear them. I fear they may have spotted something we have missed, some gap in the market. I fear we may have failed to listen to them. I fear that their new venture will grow at our expense while it poaches our personnel and our market share. And the only way to deal with fear is to cozy up to it, to look it in the eye and to pump its hand, to translate its negative energy into adrenaline, to harness it, to laugh with it rather than at it. Perhaps this could be you giving your current boss the scare of his life or her life. At the very least, providing your idea or venture has serious merit, any sensible company would attempt to buy you off. If they do not, then perhaps they are not a company that deserves to benefit from your talents. It's a thought, isn't it? As one who has been the boss for longer than many of you have been alive, I can assure you that you enjoy much greater leverage than you might believe. But you will never find that out until you go for it. For the slightly better off and on the way up, now is the time to consider whether or not you intend to continue making me, and people like me, even richer, or whether you wish to become rich yourself. You have little time left in which to make up your mind. Your youth and stamina are ebbing away. You're getting too comfortable. It's not a course for everyone, but I think you can guess what my advice to you would be. What the hell, go for it! Senior manager or professional? Pushy young Turks are impatient for news. Young Cinderellas are singing the blues. Wannabes, just like you used to be. Choose! Who's gonna fill this dead man's shoes? From Dead Man's Shoes. Welcome! I'm surprised you could bring yourself to listen to such a book. It's a good sign. It shows you're still curious, still hungry. Not as hungry as the penniless lad or lass at the beginning of this chapter, of course. But then youth is wasted on the young, and they have so much learning to do, don't they? You, on the other hand, have learnt much. There is little about your company you do not understand. Little, too, about your industry that has escaped you. You have seen a great many fools take the plunge into freelance work or set up in business on their own with such high hopes, and watched nearly all of them come crashing down in flames or creep through the bankruptcy courts hoping nobody would notice. But I bet you noticed. I'd bet my bottom dollar that you noticed. Still, there have been one or two who have made it, haven't there? One who even suggested you take the plunge with her and take a piece of the action. Was that the one you turned down? The woman who waves when she passes you in her Mercedes-Benz SLR convertible on her way to the golf club you can't afford to join? From a house on the water with its own dock, apparently? The one who is now far richer than she deserves to be? The one who got lucky? Let's face it, you were and are smarter than she is or ever will be. It's annoying, isn't it? But you don't have to give up hope. With luck, you'll make the board in 4 or 5 years if you haven't already. So much easier to strike out on your own from such a position rather than acting precipitately, no? The banks will listen more closely to a board director after all. And it's true, you have responsibilities. The mortgage has some years to go, although the house increases in value every year, and the kids aren't through college yet, but they soon will be. It's just a question of waiting, of recognizing the realities of the present, tempered by the necessities of the past and the possibilities of the future, as the author R.G. Collingwood put it. But then he was writing about history. If you detect a trace of cynicism in the above description, then you're correct to do so, and for a simple reason. In nearly 40 years of doing business, I know of only 6 senior managers or professionals between 40 and 50 who struck out on their own, and 2 of those were lawyers. 1 did very well indeed with his own law firm. 2 of them did fairly well. 1 went belly up and never recovered financially. 1 threw in the towel and owns a tiny bar on an island in Croatia. I suspect he is the happiest of the lot. The remaining 1 shot himself when his venture collapsed. None of them became really rich. Yet, you picked up this book. You're still curious. You're still hungry. Read on, my learned friend. How to Get Rich may subvert you yet, though I very much doubt it. And you know what? The kids and the house and the mortgage and your retired parents and the love of your life, whether a man or a woman, and all your current responsibilities, they are not the real problem. They are either inanimate, or they love you, or they don't love you. They will not love you less or more if you decide to surprise everyone around you and seize the time, as you could seize it if you truly wished to. Then you'd show them. Why not face up to the unpalatable truth? These are excuses. They are nothing but a smokescreen, an alibi, convenient camouflage to prevent you from accepting that you will probably never be rich. Soon you must choose. Many people would say you have left it too late to choose, but still, you picked up this book. You're still curious, you're still hungry, and you know it can be done. Even better than the young and penniless and those on their way up, you know it can be done. Better still, you know how it can be done. You have helped make it happen for someone else. The only question is, will you dare to try? If you will, then you're 1 in a million, or 2 or 3 million. Your chances are slim, but they're not impossible. My earnest advice is to get yourself a young and fearless partner with tons of stamina. Choose him or her with care. It's your best chance to get rich. Chapter 2. 1,000,000 to 1. There are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damned lies, and statistics. Thomas Carlyle from Chartism. Dare not is one thing. Cannot is another. Not everyone can be rich, but anyone can dare to. Somebody has to. Let's take a look at the arithmetic relating to the odds. By my earlier definition, only 0.00016% of 60 million British citizens are rich. That's less than 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% out of the total population. If your best friend inherited £1 million and gave you 0.00016 of their windfall, you would receive a princely 16 quid. Hey, thanks a bunch, old chum. If wealth were decided by lottery, you would have 16 chances in a million of scraping into the top 1,000 richest people in the UK. To reach the top 50, you would have to do better. A lot better. like 1 chance in a million, allowing that a fair percentage of the places in those leagues are taken by those who inherited their loot, or a good chunk of it anyway. These are not very enticing odds. Fortunately, less and less wealth is decided by the lottery of inheritance. Only a quarter of the entries now in the Sunday Times Rich List in Britain find themselves there due solely to inherited wealth, if indeed it is that many. 25 years ago it was a different story. Back then, nearly 3/4 of the buggers were force-fed their wealth from golden spoons. In those days, though, there were only 200 entries on the list. Lo, have the mighty fallen. And they'll be falling further yet when another blasted nouveau riche like you, dear reader, elbows his or her way into the golden hoard. If you can, that is. Because not all of us are cut out for it. Let us explore factors likely to exclude an individual from becoming rich. This is where we sort the wolves from the does, the prey from the predator, and you from a lifetime of wage slavery. There's health for a start. People in poor health usually find it difficult, no matter how clever they are, to muster the stamina that becoming rich demands. In any case, when you are really poorly, the allure of wealth rapidly recedes, except as far as first-class health care is concerned. I can attest to this from personal experience. Twice now I have survived life-threatening illnesses. Making money was not big on my list of priorities at that time. In fact, I was so far gone at one point that I forgot to sue the bastards who were responsible. Looking back, I must have been very ill indeed. As always, there are exceptions. The theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has been confined to a wheelchair for years with a rare and appalling disease. Yet he made a bundle with a book that very few people have ever read right through to the end. A book that has sold millions of copies, A Brief History of Time. And did you know that he featured in an edition of The Simpsons? My hat off to you, Professor! We must also factor in disadvantage and age, not of colour, sex, race, religion, upbringing, or lack of education. None of those present insuperable hurdles in a Western democracy. But mental handicap, growing senility, and the physical decline of old age, none of which need be life-threatening in the short term, virtually rule out any serious accumulation of wealth, except by inheritance or winning a lottery. So that leaves the relatively fit and those not old enough to call themselves old. Close to 40% of the population of the UK are either old enough to have little hope of acquiring real wealth, if they have not done so already, or are too young to be able to acquire it in the short term, except by inheritance. If you fall into neither of these groups, you now have only 35,999,000 people to beat. That equates to 25 chances in a million of scraping into the top 1,000 richest people in the country. Still daunting odds. But wait! There are huge chunks of the population around you who either have no desire to be rich or have chosen professions that rule them out of the race. I asked a researcher to estimate for me the total number of people working for the government in Britain. If you can afford it, always get someone else to do the grunt work. See Chapter 13, The Joys of Delegation. While it is theoretically possible for a civil servant to resign from their job and become a multimillionaire, especially apparently if they worked for the Ministry of Defence, the number of ex-civil servants in the Sunday Times Rich List is tiny. 2 of them having inherited their wealth while parading in the corridors of power, and one who was rich long before he became a minister. So, what did my researcher discover? Well, the number is astonishing. Over 5 million people work for the government in the UK in one way or another and are unlikely ever to become rich. Your odds have now improved to 28 chances in 1 million. And now look around you. How many of the people you work with, the people you socialize with, the people you see in the street, do you think have dedicated themselves to getting rich or are likely to do so any time soon? Or have the drive or aptitude to attempt to do so? 2%? 3%? 5%? Let's take 3%, which I believe to be a massive overestimate, by the way. Personally, I know only 5 acquaintances who dedicated themselves to achieving success in business in order to make themselves seriously rich, as opposed to scores of senior managers or professionals known to me who dedicated themselves to success in their business life, but allowed others to reap the main financial rewards of their labours. Those 5 people, I might add, amount to a lot less than 3% of all the people whom I believe could have become rich had they wished to do so, or had they drummed up the confidence to try. So, 3% of the 30-odd million people still in the race amounts to just under 1 million rivals. To reach the top 1,000 earners among them, all other things being equal, you have now shortened the odds to 1 chance in 1,000, which is significantly better than the 16 chances in a million we began with. Now you know what Carlyle meant by lies, damned lies, and statistics. Lastly, in any list of reasons not to get rich, we must come to philosophy and the benefits of hindsight. If I had my time again, knowing what I know today, I would dedicate myself to making just enough to live comfortably, say 30 or 40 million pounds, as quickly as I could, hopefully by the time I was 35 years old. I would then cash out immediately and retire to write poetry and to plant trees. Making money was, and still is, fun, but at one time it wreaked chaos upon my life. It blocked me from beginning to write poetry until my early 50s. It consumed my waking hours. It led me into a lifestyle of narcotics, high-class whores, drink, and consolatory debauchery. As a philosopher might put it, all the usual dreary afflictions of the seeker after wealth. These afflictions, in turn, helped to undermine my health. But, like an old punch-drunk boxer, I couldn't quit. I always craved just one more massive payday, one more appearance under the lights with the roar of the crowd and the stink of the sawdust and leather. One more fight. I can take this, young punk, I know I can. Just this once, so I can go out as a winner, so I can retire as the champ. Then I'll retire. Just this last one. Pathetic. I should have known better. There is no such thing as a permanent champ. After all, I co-wrote the first best-selling biography of Muhammad Ali back in 1974. You'll find it republished as Muhammad Ali, The Glory Years on Amazon.com. And there isn't a single fan of Muhammad Ali who does not wish he had quit the ring several years before his failing powers made the decision for him. It's no excuse, but making money is a drug. Not the money itself, the making of the money. This sounds like so much hoopla, but it's true all the same. Nobody believed that exercise could prove addictive until science stepped in and discovered endorphins, or whatever the damn things are called. And making money, I assure you, is a hell of a lot more of a rush than jogging. Up to just 7 years ago, I was still working 12 to 16 hours a day making money. With hundreds of millions of dollars in assets, I just could not let go. Like I said, it was pathetic. Because whoever dies with the most toys doesn't win. Real winners are people who know their limits and respect them. Eventually, I found a way out. I handed over day-to-day control of my businesses to younger and mostly smarter boys and girls. I cleaned up my personal life. I began doing what I wanted to do, not what I felt I had to do. After all, what did I have to prove, except perhaps to myself? It is possible that you will avoid such mistakes when you get rich. I hope so. One thing is for sure, the usual afflictions are no reason not to make the attempt. There is no reason on earth why financial success should lead to personal catastrophe, least of all the odds. The odds may still appear daunting, but only to those lacking sufficient guts and determination to try. If the odds of getting rich put you off, then you deserve to stay poor. Or, to put it more kindly, whether you deserve it or not, you will stay poor. But we're done here with reasons not to get rich. Our ends are not foretold in our beginnings. The poet was wrong there. We're heading for our own version of the glory years. We're on our way. It's time to concentrate on getting started, to take the first step on the long road to getting rich.